Welcome, adventurers, to another installment in the class comparison video series where we take a look at two classes in Pathfinder 2nd Edition and see how they stack up against each other. Today we are comparing two skill-heavy martial classes, the Investigator and the Rogue. Why these two? Well, as I just said, they are very skill-heavy. They will have lots of skill training, and they are martial classes, and that's not something that we often see. Some martials lack a lot of skill training. These two have it in spades. Additionally, in combat, each of these classes has an ability that allows them to add a d6 of precision damage when using agile finesse weapons and some other stipulations we'll talk about later. So both of these classes produce pretty crafty, cunning, and precise builds. It does distinguish them from some of the other martials who, rely on brute strength and power sometimes. So why would you choose one of these two classes, and why might you choose one over the other? Let's dive in and find out. Now, normally we do begin with combat and with attacks, frankly, but we're not going to do that today. We are going to start instead with exploration in skills needed for exploration. Both of these classes excel at that part of gameplay. If you're new to the system, skills are things that you are good at in the system, and then you can do certain activities with those skills. It includes things like nature and athletics and thievery and stealth. You can be trained, or there are additional levels of training. We won't go over all of that right now. And then you will also have an ability modifier like charisma that goes with some skills, or wisdom for others. So, for example, if you wanted to be good at nature, which would allow you to track things or subsist in nature, well, you can take some training in nature, that'll help, and then you would also want a high wisdom score. Now, the amount of skills that you can train into is usually tied to your intelligence modifier and is also tied to some of your class abilities. Certain classes have certain amount of skills plus intelligence. Some give you other skill training. It's kind of a lot to go over overall, but for the purposes of this video, what you need to know is that, frankly, a lot of martial characters like barbarians, fighters, especially if they're lower intelligence, they might only be trained in maybe 4 skills at level 1, but pretty much the bare minimum for both the Investigator and a Rogue is at least 8, usually more. So as I said, the number of skills that you are trained into is equal to something determined by your class and then your intelligence modifier. Now, the Investigator, remember, is an intelligence-based class, and they are trained into a number of skills equal to 4 plus their intelligence modifier, and they receive another skill from their subclass, which is called their methodology. So at level 1, typically you will have 4 skills from the class, 4 from your intelligence, and then another 1 from your subclass for a total of 9 skills at level 1. And then the Rogue has an absolutely insane, one-of-a-kind in the game, training in additional skills equal to 7 plus your intelligence modifier at level 1. And then they also do pick up a skill from their subclass, which is called their racket. So even a dumb rogue without high intelligence is going to be trained in at least 8 skills. And then if you put even a single point into intelligence, that will be as high as 9. Furthermore, the Rogue is the only class, the only one in the system that gains skill increases at every level. So at these levels, they can get training in even more skills or level up some of the other skills that they are already trained in. Additionally, they also pick up skill feats like crazy. Skill feats are special actions that use your skills, so you can only pick up skill feats in the skills that you're trained in. Rogues pick these up at every level compared to every other for every other class. So they are the only class to do so. So in the end, a level 5 rogue is going to have more skills and more feats than most level 10 characters. So both of these classes will have great training and lots of skills to be able to recall knowledge and sneak and thieve and open locks and survive in nature and track things and whatever you want to do. The rogue does rely on the standard set of skills and skill feats and choices that are available to all characters, though as I said, they will be able to pick up so much more than any other character in the system. But the Investigator actually has some unique exploration abilities. In fact, I would dare say that the Investigator, at least in my opinion, is the only truly exploration-based class. They are designed for it. Let's go over the core investigation abilities of the Investigator, starting with Pursue Elite. Now, this is a standard class feature that all investigators have. If you have a little bit of information about something, you can designate it the target of one of your investigations. Once you do so, you gain a +1 circumstance bonus to recall knowledge on that creature or person or place. It's actually pretty open-ended as to what can be a subject of an investigation. And you can investigate 2 things at a time. You then can also use your clue in reaction. If someone else in your party is trying to recall knowledge about the target of your investigation, you clue them in and you give them a +1 bonus to their recall knowledge check. So having an investigator in your party is kind of like having a +1 to recall knowledge about all of the important things that you are trying to figure out, which is really fantastic to have. Additionally, each subclass of the Investigator will gain some additional investigation-like abilities. I won't go over them now. If you want to check those out, check out my Investigator video. But needless to say, if you are solving a mystery, having an Investigator is invaluable. So both of these classes really do excel at exploration, investigation, stealthing, sleuthing, all of those types of things. That shouldn't be understated. Good exploration can make combat so much easier, or even bypass combat altogether. You might figure out that there's another way into the castle that you're trying to get into. You might figure out that the monster guarding the castle is weak to fire or is very afraid of music or something like that, and you can buy items to get in there and have no problem with the encounter. But, if you do get into a scrap, both the Investigator and the Rogue are up to the task. In combat, both the Investigator and the Rogue share a very similar core mechanic. They each apply an additional D6 of precision damage to some of their strikes if using an Agile or Finesse melee weapon, an Agile or Finesse unarmed attack, or a ranged weapon, and if that ranged weapon is thrown, it must have the Agile Finesse trait. Investigators can also apply this damage with the sap, and if I think I'm reading the rules correctly, the Rogue wording also states that a ranged unarmed attack can use this damage, even if it's not necessarily Agile or Finesse. I don't know what edge case that is for, but I'm sure they put it there for a reason. But really what you need to know is, as one of these 2 character classes, you'll probably be using a lighter weapon, but using it very, very accurately. The 2 classes do differ quite a lot, however, in when they actually can apply this additional D6 of precision damage. The Investigator uses something called Devise a Stratagem. First, you take an action to devise a stratagem. You plan an attack. You roll an attack roll, and you can use your intelligence modifier rather than your dexterity or strength on that roll, which is good because your intelligence will probably be higher than your dexterity or strength. Next, on your second action of that turn, you can choose to attack using that roll that you already rolled. If you do so and hit, then you get to add that additional D6 of precision damage. To recap, one action is to devise a stratagem. The second is actually to make a strike with that. And then, third action is whatever you want it to be. Now, devise a stratagem does have some downsides, namely that you are stuck with that devise a stratagem roll on your next attack against that creature. So if you're standing next to something, you devise a stratagem for your first action and it is a bad roll, and you decide to attack anyway, you can't roll a new attack. You are stuck with that bad roll. So you're going to miss, and then maybe on your third attack, you could roll again. Though a lot of players would obviously choose not to do that and instead do something else with their second and third actions, which is kind of the point of this combat utility and does play really well into the style of the Investigator. One huge bonus of Devise a Stratagem, though, is if you are devising a stratagem against something that is the target of one of your Pursue a Leads, Devise a Stratagem is now a free action. So if you are investigating someone and then you get into a combat with them, action 0, free action, can be Devise a Stratagem, and then you still have all 3 actions for whatever else you want to do. Another thing that I think is really good to call out is remember this does work with ranged weapons, so you can stand in one spot, devise a stratagem against a creature over here, and if you have a really bad roll, well, you can just say, well, I'm not going to take that shot. I did the math, I don't have an angle. Second action, I'm going to shoot over there instead. It's a little less action tax heavy than I think the melee version of Devise a Stratagem, where you're standing next to something, know you won't hit, and then have to maybe run to the other side of the field or something like that. So I think it works really well with ranged weapons. So when does a rogue get to apply that d6 of precision damage? Well, first, anytime a creature that they're attacking is off guard, flat-footed, to them for any reason. This is called sneak attack. And then they have a second ability, or maybe it's kind of a subclause ability of that first, called surprise attack. If a rogue uses either deception or stealth to enter initiative, and they are acting before an enemy creature has had a chance to act, those creatures are automatically off guard to that rogue. And I think overall this is a little bit easier and more reliable than Devise a Stratagem. First of all, I see it as a little bit of a double bonus where the enemy is already off guard to you, so your accuracy will be improved because their armor class is lowered. Second, there's no limitation to the number of times per round that you can use this. So if you start your round in a flanking position, you can attack 3 times and apply that d6 of precision damage to every single strike. Third, I do think that this makes the rogue a little bit more of a teamwork player because it's very beneficial for your team to set up flanks for your rogue, to leave a creature flat-footed, maybe hit it with a bottled lightning or something like that. Also, at later levels, rogues have abilities to make an enemy off guard to them for more reasons, and to even make enemies off guard to their teammates, so it is a bit more of a team play style, in a way, I would say, than the Investigator, who is a bit more of a lone wolf. So, in the end, both of these deal an additional d6 precision damage when using lighter weapons like rapiers. The Investigator is maybe a little bit more of a loner and can kind of get stuck with their bad rolls and can only use their ability once per turn. The Rogue's abilities, I think, are a little bit easier, a little bit better suited for teamwork, and can be used more often. So, in the end, if we are strictly comparing the combat utility of these two classes, I do think that the Rogue comes out ahead. Another thing I'd like to talk about is the variation in the subclasses between these two classes. The Rogue's subclasses actually can slightly alter your combat mechanics. The Thief Rogue lets you apply dexterity to damage, which is incredible. The Ruffian lets you use regular weapons and not just those agile and finesse with your rogue abilities, so you can be a tough, strength-based rogue. On that note, the rogue subclasses actually optionally change what your key ability score is, so you can be a charisma, a dexterity, an intelligence, or a strength-based rogue. The Investigator is only ever intelligence-based, and their subclasses don't offer different combat mechanics. But the subclasses do offer different exploration mechanics. You can be a pretty darn good healer using forensic medicine, or you can be very commanding in conversation using the interrogation methodology, or make some elixirs and, little potions. I guess not potions, sorry, that's magic, just elixirs, those are alchemical, using the alchemical sciences methodology. This really does support the notion of the Investigator being all about exploration, considering that their subclasses don't give combat boosts, but give exploration boosts. Another similarity between these two is actually something that they don't have, and that is magic. The rogue used to have an Eldritch Trickster subclass, but that's been removed in the remaster. The Investigator does have alchemical sciences, but remember that alchemy is not magic in Pathfinder 2nd edition. And not having any magical abilities whatsoever is actually not very common in the system, so I think it's worth noting. I may have missed like a later level feat or something, so if I have, let me know about it, but overall, I don't think there's really anything magical about either of these two classes. So if you do like a little bit of magic with your martial abilities, well, you could still pick up an archetype dedicated to that, but you're not going to get it from the class itself. All right, now let's talk about roleplay a little bit with these two classes because I think both are really fun and really pretty easy when it comes to roleplay. Starting with the Investigator, I feel like we've got, some pretty strong Investigator characters in books, TV, movies that all can be used as an inspiration. And as a rogue, your subclass will inform your roleplay quite a lot. You could be extra sneaky and cunning as a mastermind rogue. You could be kind of cold, off-putting, but devilishly handsome as a scoundrel. And as always, with either of these classes, whatever backstory you want is something you probably can apply to your character. It is what you want to make it. I just think that these two have it pretty easy when it comes to roleplay because I feel like there are a lot of investigators and scoundrels and mastermind thieves and things like that out there in books, movies, TVs, plays for us to use as inspiration. Well, there we have it. If you want to be very good in exploration and in combat and like using pointy, precise weapons that do an extra d6 of damage sometimes, the Investigator and the Rogue are really good options for you. If you really like the exploration and roleplay and want to solve mysteries, absolutely go for the Investigator. If you want to lurk in the shadows, maybe shine in combat just a little bit more, I'd choose the Rogue. What about you, adventurers? Do you prefer the extreme roleplay of the Investigator, or do you want to pop out of the shadows and hammer away on an off-guard enemy like the Rogue? Let's talk about it in the comments. Until then, remember to pair these classes up with a truly hard-hitting frontline character, because when it comes to oozes and swarms and frankly many other creatures in the system, those pointy little rapiers are just not going to do it.